Rise of the Cybermen is effectively an origin story for the Cybermen. Like Dalek, it draws heavily from the material produced when the show was off air in the 90s. In this case, it's the audio play Spare Parts, and honestly, if you haven't listened to it, you really need to. To be fair, the idea of televising an origin story for the Cybermen is actually quite brilliant. I think the best portrayal of the Cybermen recognises that they were once creatures like us that made a particular evolutionary decision at one point, and became monsters of their own doing. They're a twisted, distorted mirror of humanity, so going back to their roots makes sense. As does the point of stripping down their backstory and mythology. The 10th planet is a product of its time. The concept of a dark twin planet in our solar system just isn't going to fly on Saturday night telly, and that's before you get into the grotesque continuity resurrecting that we had with Attack of the Cybermen. While the Daleks were a simple concept with a solid art behind them, the Cybermen have become a muddled mess of a monster. That is with the exception of Series 10, I must add. While the Dalek design is elegant in its simplicity, the Cybermen design is not. Again, I actually prefer the uncanniness of the cloth design in the 10th planet, or Now World Enough in Time the Doctor Falls, or even the Buckethead from the moon base, over the more recognisable appearance from the invasion onwards. However, I also quite dig the Earthshot 80s Cybermen too. However, the Cybermen from the classic series look like they should be appearing in bananas in pyjamas, with their permanent frowny faces. So the redesign of the Cybermen was necessary, and to be honest, it's the best part of this whole two-parter from the point of view of the Cybermen. It's powerful, intimidating, and absolutely massive. Director Graham Harper does a phenomenal job here, hitting on the idea to shoot the Cybermen from low angles in order to make them seem more intimidating. The scene of the Cybermen crashing the party is a beautiful sequence that is effectively handled. That said, I'm not entirely convinced they needed a catchphrase. Giving them delete seems to concede that the best the Cybermen can ever hope to be is a sort of second-rate Daleks. That feels like it's selling the concept a bit short. That said, I can just about let it slide as it's kind of awesome at the same time.
It's happening again.
What do you mean?
I've seen them before.
What are they?
Cybermen.
Mr. Lumic.
President, I suppose a remark about crashing the party would be appropriate at this point.
However, the real problem comes when you try to bundle all of this up with the show's attachment to the real world. Obviously, there are some stories that you just can't tell in modern London, because they simply won't be modern London at the end of it. Davies runs into that problem quite a bit from the second season on, as we discover that smashing Big Ben and killing Tony Blair are the limits of his ability to deviate from reality, without creating a modern London in Doctor Who that is completely unrecognisable when compared to the one in the real world. So the Dalek and Cybermen invasion in Doomsday gets handily reversed before any damage is done. The Master's occupation in the Last of the Time Lords can't be allowed to stand. Similarly, you can't have the modern day planet Earth give birth to a race of Cybermen and still have it appear to be anything like modern day planet Earth. It breaks the connection the show has been fostering so carefully, and so Doctor Who tries to have its cake and eat it. Presented with the urge to do an origin for the Cybermen and remain anchored in the real world, the show decides to pull a bit of a cheat. We'll see an alternative modern day London give birth to the Cybermen, and the concept stretches so far that it almost breaks. It's a cheat bigger than the handy reset buttons used to avoid the consequences of Doomsday and the Last of the Time Lords. But by setting it in an alternative world, Davies and writer Tom McRae get to imagine a world that is both the same and different. The only problem is that they need to explain how it is different, and yet it still remains the same. How much of Rise of the Cybermen could happen in our world? Why doesn't it? And might it still? In fairness, it's fairly obvious how the world is the same. All the trappings are right there. It's shot in modern day Cardiff, dressed up to look like modern day London. But that's so different from the rest of the series. People still drive cars, the landmarks are present and accounted for, people still wear suits. There are homeless people, there is still a difference between the rich and the poor. There's arguably the same fixation on technology, if not actually a bit worse here. In short, the world of Rise of the Cybermen is superficially quite similar. However, there are also differences. Some of them are simply cosmetic. After all, Zeppelins are more cool than practical. However, there are some fundamental differences that the adventure glosses over because it is very clearly concerned about drawing attention to the fact this is not a very close approximation of the real world. Why bother having a parallel world if it's not going to appear familiar? So we get a bunch of fundamental differences that the series really glosses over. Apparently, this version of Britain is a police state. It has a president rather than a prime minister. There is a military curfew in effect. People are disappearing off the streets. Apparently, the Zeppelins are systematic of a more rigid class structure. Where you been living, mate? One of the soldiers asked Mickey. Up there with the toffs. There are fairly significant differences between our world and the world seen in Rise of the Cybermen. However, most of this episode downplays these differences, even though, based on the social structure and level of technology on display here, there is no reason why this world in this episode should look so much like our own. The only reason it does look so similar to our world, with Rose and the Doctor wandering through the city centre as they would in any other episode, is because Davy's version of the show is firmly anchored in a world that looks and feels like our world. That's the biggest problem here, the attempt to fit a round peg in a square hole, or a Cybermen origin story in contemporary London. The truly terrifying thing about the Cybermen of the 10th planet was the idea that they did it to themselves. Some species somewhere decided they would be a lot better as a mix of flesh and machine, so they opted to upgrade. Of course, Rise of the Cybermen acknowledges that we might be a little bit complicit due to our dependence on technology, but there's a world of difference between the idea of a species upgrading themselves and something saying megalomaniac assimilating people. The former idea is truly unsettling and disturbing, the idea that somewhere a civilization decided that it was the next evolutionary leap for them. The latter is just a conventional Doctor Who plotting that gives us a handy villain for the Doctor to defeat before the credits roll. Rise of the Cybermen feels like it took the easy way out and is almost afraid of doing the most difficult but rewarding work. Part of the reason the Dalek worked so much better was the way that it worked hard to earn the respect of the audience. There's just something way too comfortable about all this. Which is, of course, the continuing problem with Rose and the 10th Doctor. I know they are supposed to seem arrogant. Davies has confirmed this in interviews, and their hubris is explicitly mentioned in Tooth and Claw. However, that doesn't make their relationship any easier to swallow. They seem exceptionally cliquish and exclusive. Adding Mickey to that mix, it makes it even more obvious. Of course, Rise of the Cybermen does give Mickey a nice character arc and makes him more sympathetic, but it also makes it a lot easier to hate the Doctor and Rose for their smugness when seen through his eyes. When Mickey asks about a story they are telling, the Doctor is at best dismissive. Oh, it was this planet thing, asteroid, it's a long story, you had to be there. When Rose is tempted to visit her father, Mickey quite rightly points out that the Doctor has absolutely no interest in him as a person. Oh, so it's Rose again then, is it? Nothing out there to tempt me. And again, the Doctor is just dismissive. Well, I don't know, I can't worry about everything. Just Rose, apparently. Of course, we're meant to agree with Mickey, but that doesn't make the Doctor's obsession with Rose any easier to deal with. I liked Rose as a companion in the first series, but the way that Davies uses her as an obsession for the Doctor here is quite frustrating. To be fair, no companion before or since has occupied the character's attention so much, but that doesn't make the second series any less annoying. Similarly, Rose's jealousy over absolutely any random female character the Doctor might mention feels like a bit of a diminishing of her character. When the Doctor mentions Lucy mentioned the UK as a president, Rose bitchily responds, oh, maybe Lucy's just a bit thick. The problem is that Rose has kind of reached the end of her development in the parting of the ways, and the second series just hasn't got a clear arc for her once you get past the first couple of episodes. On the other hand, Noel Clarke gets to do some good stuff here as Mickey, really extending the character a good deal. The explanation for his insecurity and inferiority complex makes sense, and his sense of guilt over the accident that killed his grandmother is understated and effective, immediately giving us a hook into the character, who has been fairly undeveloped through the series. On the other hand, Clark's performance as Ricky isn't quite as solid. It's clear he's aiming for a bunch of macho cliches, but Clark can't really pull them off, making Ricky look more silly than badass. Although Clark does a great job with the revelation in the next episode that he's London's most wanted for parking tickets. Of course, all this is undermined by the fact that it's very clear that even Mickey's final episode is still about Rose, really. Mickey is just a trial run. It feels a bit convenient that Rose should stumble into a magic alternative world that her father is still alive in, and then the world will tie into the big end of the year finale. Not to mention, of course, that Pete's wife is handily killed off so that he can be paired with Rose's living mother later on. In many ways, it feels like giving Mickey some much needed character development is only happening because Rise of the Cybermen needs to make sure all the pieces fit together for Rose's departure. The real highlight of this episode, of course, is the return of the Cybermen themselves. In this incarnation, the fused human mechanical creatures are created by John Lumick as a means to achieve immortality for all of humanity. Using the earpods, Lumick is able to control the human population of London and have them voluntarily submit to the Cybermen creation process. The Cybermen designs consist of an impressive combination of retro inspiration melded with some Cylon-style mannerisms. The resulting look is extremely cool, but manages to retain the slightly campy Doctor Who design style. As with any cliffhanger, a good end sequence is required, and Rise of the Cybermen certainly delivers both in scope and with some really great dialogue. Rose, her alternative universe father, the Doctor, and Mickey, are surrounded by an armada of Cybermen. In what has surely been remembered as a classic Doctor Who line for years to come, the Cybermen announce, "You will perish under maximum deletion. Delete, delete, delete." And overall, this episode managed to present an original and engaging character-driven story that featured a triumphant return for another one of Doctor Who's greatest villains from the past, and man, I loved it. Overall, despite my criticism, I still thoroughly enjoy this episode. And for me, the Cybermen are one of the very best concepts to come out of Doctor Who, if not the best. And to see them reintroduced here in the modern series in this way, while not perfectly, was still a very great sight indeed. Although I don't really agree with the whole invention of the delete catchphrase for the Cybermen, it is still kind of cool and does act as a really great cliffhanger to the episode here. Fair play to writer Tom McRae, he does a great job. Nevertheless, in terms of an overall score, I'm afraid you will have to wait until next time.